So the first section on our next unit, this whole chapter is dealing with volume. And to start out, we are going to learn the formulas for a few different shapes, particularly prisms and cylinders. So the first thing that's important to know to be able to do volume is to figure out what kind of shape you're dealing with. So if you take a look at these 6 shapes here, these are the 6 shapes that you're going to be finding the volume of in this chapter. So we'll go through each one. The first one, hopefully you can tell, is a square, or I'm sorry, not a square, a cube. But it's also more specifically known as a square prism. Okay, so I'm going to write that over here too. It could also be called a square prism, and we'll get to prisms more in a second. The next one is a cylinder. Then we have a pyramid. And number 4 is a cone. Now the difference between a pyramid and a cone is a cone has a circular base, where a pyramid could have a square, a rectangle, a trapezoid, just a base that is not a circle, so a polygon that has straight edges as opposed to a circle. Number 5 is a triangular prism. Notice it has bases that are triangles. And then number 6 is a sphere. So those are the 6 basic shapes you need to know. Now, moving on to the next slide, you're actually going to be identifying prisms. Prisms are tricky just because it's something that you don't really see a lot in other classes, but it's really important in geometry to recognize a prism because all prisms have the same volume formula. A prism always has rectangular sides. You don't have to write this, but if you would like to, it has rectangular sides. So notice all of these shapes have sides that are rectangles. It's made up of sides that are rectangles. But you name it based on whatever its base is. So this is a triangular prism because it's a triangular base. This is a rectangular prism, rectangular base. Square prism, pentagonal prism, hexagonal prism. So the number one mistake people make when dealing with prisms is they don't identify the base. And we'll talk about that a lot when we get to triangular prisms. So the first thing we're going to start with is rectangular prisms, which are pretty simple. The volume of a rectangular prism, the formula you're going to see the most often because it's the most general, is this capital B times H. And what the capital B stands for is the volume, I'm sorry, no, not the volume, the area of the base. So you take whatever the area of the base is and then you multiply it by the height. Now you might be more familiar with the formula length times width times height. It ends up being the exact same thing because the area of the base, in this case, if it's a rectangle, is length times width, and then you just multiply by the height. So whatever one you're most comfortable with is fine. Now, if I want to find the volume of this rectangular prism, the first thing I'm going to do is identify what my base is. I'm going to go with just whatever it's sitting on and say that that's the base right there. The first thing I need to do is find my capital B value, which is the area of the base. The area of this green base down here is going to be 8 times, if you might get tricked and say 5, but that's actually a side length of 7 at the bottom there. So it'd be 8 times 7, which is 56. The other thing I need to identify is the height. The height of the object is the number that represents how tall the shape is when it's sitting on its base. So in this case, it would be 5. So the area of the base times the height, 56 times 5. I don't have my calculator. That comes out to be 280 units cubed. Now, just to show you how you could do it differently and still get the same answer, if you look over at the next shape, all I did was turn it. So now the base instead it's sitting on is this 5 by 7 rectangle. So if I find the area of the base when it's sitting this way, it's 5 times 7, which is 35. And now the height, since it's sitting on this red base, the height is 8. So my volume is still 35 times 8, which we expect to get the same exact thing. So with rectangular prisms, there's 2 different ways you can do it. Because the sides are rectangles and the bases are also rectangles, it doesn't matter which one you choose as the base as long as you're being consistent with your numbers. There's one more example here, a rectangular prism. Here we can go with a base, that's this bottom part here. My capital B stands for area of the base, so I'm taking 2 times 2, which gives me 4. When that shape is sitting on the base, the height is 4. So my volume is just 4 times 4, which is 16. Now, just to show you, if you do like the volume equals length times width times height, that's fine. It's very, very easy because then you can just take length, width, height. 2 times 4 is 16. So that, again, that only works for rectangular prisms. The reason I like to use this one is because it's the same for any prism, so you don't have to keep recognizing between each one. Whereas if you use length times width times height, you have to remember the triangular prism differently. All right, now we're moving on to the real challenge, which is triangular prisms. So we're probably going to get one more in here before I have to switch videos before it gets too long. So there's a few key things you need to know. It's called a triangular prism. So the base must be the triangle. Even if it's not sitting on the triangle, maybe it's turned on its side and it's sitting on the rectangular side, the base has to be a triangle. So when you're finding that capital B value, you're finding the area of a triangle. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is in the other prisms, the area of the base was a rectangle, so it was length times width. But now my base is a triangle, so I have to do 1/2 base times height. So just don't go too fast when you go through these. Think about what your base is. Even if you want to draw it separately on the side, you can do that. So in this case, my base has to be the triangle, so it's this shape right here. It has a length of 4, a length of 3, and a length of 5. So when I substitute my numbers in to find the area of that base, it's a right triangle. So my height and my base are going to be 3 and 4. So 1/2 times 3 times 4. And that gives me 6 for my capital B value. Now remember, the height is always with respect to the shape when it's sitting on its base. So here's the base, that pink triangle down here. When it's sitting on that base, the height is going to be 8. So my volume is 6 times 8, which is 48 units cubed. Now when we did the rectangular prism last time, we were able to flip it around and use a different base. You cannot find the volume of a triangular prism another way, because if I would flip it and sit it on this rectangular side, the base must still be a triangle. So don't use a base as a rectangle when it's a triangular prism. It has to be the triangle.